All right. It is Friday, February 14th, 2025. I guess it's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day, that's right.
Uh, Not even in that mindset today. So we've been chatting a little bit already. You wanted to update on the Triple Design Matrix book. So why
Mhm.
don't we start there? So
Okay.
coming soon.
So when Ra and I were business partners in 1999 to probably 2002, 3, 4, somewhere in there. Um, I can look it up. But when we were business partners, um, the contract we had, Marvin, myself, and Ra, was that we were be responsible for the professional organization. And he wanted us to be teaching scientifically based design and to validate it statistically and
Mhm.
medically. So he, the offer he made us was that he would share everything that the voice had told him over however much time it took. And we did that. He went home, we got a contract together, we got a legal agreement together. He came back, stayed in our home for several weeks, and we met every day around 10 in the morning at our dining room table and spent probably till 4 in the afternoon with him talking.
Mm.
And us, Tom Pfeiffer recorded, and there were many, many, many video audios that were all transcribed. And one of the things he gave me and said, "You take this, I don't know what to do with it," was that when he was sitting at his desk, as he described it, and the voice was giving him the information, his dog Barley was underneath. Maybe it was a table, not a desk. He talked as though it was a desk.
Mhm.
And he said to the voice, or thought to the voice, "Well, if this is a human design, what about barley?" And the voice said, "When mammals sleep, they are in a different matrix. And we as humans, mammals, when we sleep, we go horizontal and we then move into a different matrix." Um, and he didn't think anything was there to do with it. He had two matrices. He had the mental world matrix, which is the human design, and he had the physical biological matrix. Both of those matrices, if you look at them, are the only two matrices that have the emotional center, the solar plexus. And it's very interesting to redo Ra's charts with the multidimensional, because in the multidimensional, he does get centers and stuff that he didn't know he had,
Mhm.
like he was emotionally defined. And he just gave it to me as a throwaway. Um, and when I began testing, well, first I noticed clinically that a person who had an undefined sacral center, who gained the sacral center in the lunar design, which is the mammalian matrix, um, they were very different than a person who had a sacral center and then lost it.
Mhm.
And I began checking that out clinically. Rod didn't really want anything to do with that at first. And this was probably, well, we did the first class in November of 1999. And that was before I ran any of the statistics. So the class was at a venue in Santa Monica, and we had, I want to say 50 or 60 people. and Ra taught formats. And I think it was a 1 day. It was either 1 day or 2 day.
I'm sorry, what are formats?
Those are the individual, abstract, and collective circuits.
Oh, the circuitry stuff. Okay.
But when I did the circuitry does not hold scientifically.
All right.
So at the point at which we did that class, Rod did the morning, he did the formats, and in the afternoon, I presented the dream design. We called it the dream rave. And it was the first time that that matrix was even made public. So Rod didn't know anything about it. And so I began talking about a series of cases I had where things in the human design either were present or absent when you did the lunar matrix. And we had both a solar matrix in a 15 gate horizontal design and a lunar. So I taught that. And as we were leaving and getting into my car, Ross said to Marvin and me, I think now I could write some keynotes. And we said, okay, great, let's plan a seminar. In those days, everything was in person. So we planned a seminar for Sedona in January. And the Triple Design Matrix book, which I am publishing as source material. The stripe here says it's not for resale, it's a proof. Is a series of three seminars that were transcribed. The big one, the most important one in the Triple Design Matrix book, was a seminar Ra and Marvin and I did in Sedona over, I believe, 2 days. We had about 100 people. And it was the first time that Ra had any keynotes to present or had spent any time really thinking about this matrix. So in this book, I presented, and the book is a little bit out of sequence because I presented the keynotes that Ra did first. I thought people would be more interested in those. And then I presented the sleep architecture, which I spent a good part of the day presenting. I presented the sleep architecture and the data on things like adenosine that is probably in the body graph released from the heart center.
I've never even heard that word before. Identicine?
Adenosine is a hormone
Oh, okay.
that is released during sleep, during the deepest stages of sleep. And what is especially interesting about the physiology of the dream layer, or what happens to us when we sleep, is that the 15 gate matrix has no solar plexus, no crown or ajna, and no heart center. So we basically are moving into a physiologic, biological matrix, which is, according to my calculation, a lunar minute calculation. So, talking specifically right now about the triple design matrix, and I'll get to the other part in a bit. Once we began working with it, we were only working with the mental world, the human design chart, the solar dream design, and the lunar dream design, hence triple. And it was rather informative to do it that way, Ra came up with a good assessment of what the different spheres were and how to break it down. And from a clinical standpoint, what was so interesting to me was that having been a Jungian analyst and working extensively with my patients' dreams, I knew that dreams were not just the throwaway Ra was hypothesizing, that given that they occur in a 15-gate spiritual matrix, they are activating us to connect with the oneself and with humanity as a collective whole. And when we sleep, we don't have a mind or an ajna. We are purely in the collective archetypal mix that Jung described, the collective consciousness of one being, one humanity. And so as I looked at the three matrices, I began to think that the statistic of what happens when we sleep versus when we're awake would give us different types. And so I did test the factors and the multivariate analysis of variance and statistical tests to see if, in fact, we could say that there are types in the different consciousness planes. And there are statistically significant different types. So a waking design is statistically different than a sleeping design. They are not the same animal at all. So in this book, I transcribed the Sedona seminar, and there were two others. One other that we did in my Pacific Palisades home for the general public. So the one we did in Sedona was not at all for the general public. It was for professionals in human design. And Ra's intent was that Marvin and I would be teaching professionals and hold to the science. And he would go off and teach at about a fourth grade level for the general population. And he wasn't really interested in the statistics when he saw that it didn't validate some of his hypotheses. So this book is source material of great importance because not only does it explain why meditation is so critical in moving our consciousness away from the mental waking world and the traumas that happen in that world, but into the alignment with the soul. And according to the Tree of Life, if you're not aligned with the soul and you're not living from that sense of oneness with a greater collective and with the spiritual principles that govern more than just the mental waking world. In fact, many people in day-to-day life do not live by spiritual principles. And so working with the multidimensional matrix empowers people to live from their soul, not from their mind. Ra told us to not live from the mind, but he didn't really give the sacral center and the channels alternative to the sacral center that come out of the splenic center and can align with the higher self. So in this book, what I did was to preserve the source material. I did not change Ra's words or meaning, but I did do a commentary, which is in blueprint to distinguish it from the original. And I went into some detail about where and what the science showed in terms of the matrices and in terms of the keynotes and the other things that we did. And there are case examples to teach people how to use the alternative matrices. And what was especially surprising to me, going back after 15 years and looking at the book, was that Ra talked about the importance of integrating the matrices and literally said that if you do not integrate the matrices with the spiritual and the physical world, you're missing critical information in understanding how you function. So I do have audios of everything we did. And when I can access them, I will republish them. And I will also publish some of Catherine de Jersey's astrological work. I have rights to all of her materials, including I own the rights to her book.
Did you say you have some audio for Catherine de Jersey as well?
Yes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear her voice because I can picture it in my mind from her book, but I haven't actually heard it. I have so many questions. Let's start with animals and the matrix and dreams and stuff. Because let me see if I can, the whole time you're talking, I'm like, how do I put this question towards you? Willow, our newest dog, is the most disobedient, sweet dog we've ever had. She just does not, like, short of sitting for a cookie, trying to get her to, like, come or anything, she's just not having it. But I'll probably get to a point here eventually. But when our dogs sleep, they end up, like, running and they're scared and they're whining, right? They have these, like, little nightmares. And in my mind, I'm thinking if they're kind of in that mammalian, you're kind of in a protect your body state, right? Because you're basically letting go and you're relaxing. So effectively, I assume that's because you're just pure instinct listening for danger but trying to rest. So when my dog is having a nightmare, I'm starting to think, like, is the dog having a nightmare or is it picking up on my energy? And the reason I ask that is that Naomi said something a few weeks ago to me that I've been experimenting with. And the idea was that dogs or maybe it was mammals, but specifically with my dogs, if I picture in my mind what I want the dog to do, see if it comes and does that. I can get Willow to come and sit right beside me where I want her. I think at this point I'm batting about 75% by thinking about it. But if I try to get her, nothing. And so part of me is like, I don't know if I'm imagining that.
Well, dogs, in terms of animal communication, dogs think in pictures.
Yeah.
So they don't understand.
I'm listening. I'm just closing the door.
They don't really understand language.
Right.
And they can learn language, but maybe Willow is not a language person. So she might understand sound, and she might understand the image, but I would begin to associate the image with a word.
Okay, so let's keep on that topic for a second. I don't generally see visuals in my mind, so I have to like really concentrate, like imagine what she would look like next to me.
Well, you could imagine her when you say the word come, Willow, you could imagine her getting up from wherever she is and coming to you.
Hmm. So while saying it, but I guess that's my point. Like, am I correct in this experiment that this seems to actually like she does seem to respond to what I think about in my mind? Like as so
Well,
far.
she would not respond to the thoughts of other people
Hmm.
because you are a person.
Oh, right. Okay, that's interesting too.
So she might pick up on the thoughts of other people, but she probably isn't going to care.
Mm. It is. I'm sure I've shared this before, but like if Wendy and I get into uh, sensitive territory, I wouldn't even call it an argument. It'd be more like this just feels icky. The dogs immediately start like this is the time they choose to fight with each other, like play fight. But to the point where we can't even make eye contact with each other. Like it's like what? And it's almost so they're picking up something, but it's like it's fascinating. So okay, the other part of that is if we're sleeping and dreaming, we're getting information. Um, when people meditate, and the idea is generally, it's I think you're encouraged to sit up straight and cross your legs, and I'm sure it has something to do with the physiology of your body, and I kind of view it like you're opening your head up like a satellite dish to
Well, it
receive.
depends on how you're meditating. If you're meditating sitting up, you're in your solar alpha meditation. But if you lay down, you're in a different brainwave.
Okay, so this is awesome because that's not what I thought my question was, but it is now. So because I've often wondered like, do I want to be in a certain position for a certain type of meditation? And I think almost that's kind of
You
what
know, Sean, you're making yourself crazy.
I know.
And all of this stuff is really interesting stuff. But as Catherine de Jersey said to me, dear, don't live your life by astrology.
Mm.
And I don't. I don't even look at transits for the most part. Now, if something comes across my desk, like I got something about the full moon we're in,
Mm.
and I know it's a strong full moon. You can feel it. Other people feel it. I'm getting calls from clients, etc. But we know that. And we need to rely on our own inner spiritual integrity and self. Um, I think, Sean, staying centered in yourself and self reflecting, if you didn't speak to anybody else for a week and all you did was go inside yourself and ask, what do I know about this? What do I know about what I feel or what I perceive? You'd get a hell of a lot more information
Hmm.
than with all the research you're doing.
Well, I wouldn't call it research. We call it micro experiments all over the place. So, but yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
I think it's a distraction for you.
Probably. I still am just very curious about when someone is sitting up or lying down, though.
Yeah,
Like just.
but if you meditate sitting up,
Mm.
you'll have an experience. Then try meditating lying down.
Mm.
See what the difference of your experience is. Because I could tell you what my experience is, but it may not be yours. You're designed differently.
Mm. Well, I'm almost sure as shooting if I lie down, I'm probably going to fall asleep because I'm just so much more comfortable.
And then when you get up, ask what you know now that you didn't know before you lay down.
Mm.
Or maybe your body just needs that restoration with no thought.
Hmm. Yeah, that's I've been working on that a lot lately. I have to almost say out loud like stop. There's just this information coming at me like, and I have to like it is like telling my higher mind like I no more for now. I need to rest or something. But the fact that I have to actually do that is still new to me.
When you're taking in information, you're in your mental waking world. Until you stop and go into the solar emotional angelic matrix, you do not have access to creative intelligence because that comes through the splenic channel without concern for emotion. Thus, you must be in a spiritual matrix. And you're not going to get into that matrix when you're thinking
Hmm.
or when you're in an alpha state. So, in order to be in the meditative state of true spirituality, you must still the mind. And if the only way you can still your mind is laying down, then lay down.
Yeah, it's funny. That makes it sounds too simple, but it's exactly correct. Like I get overwhelmed and really just actually going to sleep and having a nap. I it's almost like I'm still a kid and don't want to have a nap. You know, like when you're being told to go have a nap. There's
Well,
like internal.
here's the issue that I see with you, Sean. Um, you have visual issues. Your eyes don't always focus on the same plane. And so growing up, when you have visual issues, maybe auditory sequencing issues, I don't know about that in you. Um, you're not going to want to shut down because you're still feeling like you're not getting all the information. And that even when you're given all the information, you can't grasp it all. So, if you're wanting to be an A person, you want to stay with it until you, quote, get it.
Mhm.
But you can't get it at that level because you're missing pieces of the information. So I don't know. I think you know more than you think you know from your own inner experiences. And I think the underlying fear is that you're going to miss something if you don't stay alert. Um, but you're going to get more if you take a break because your visual system can't handle the overload. So at a certain point, when you're receiving auditory information and your visual system can't grasp and visualize it, you lose it. So now you have it, then you don't.
Yeah, I have high visual awareness. I my mind can forecast a problem 2 years down the line, so I'm reverse engineering it real time. Like I know I do that. Yeah, it's.
You see, but that's an internal process.
Mhm.
And that internal process may not be at its optimum because you're making it external to yourself.
Well, and the other thing that just keeps coming to my head is the words decision fatigue. I just have so many fires everywhere that I'm trying to put out. Some are my making, some are others. and I'm just like I'm overwhelmed, and so and each decision results in future decisions because that decision.
So the best way to make a decision that is an important decision, go to sleep. And go to sleep with the question, what do I want to have happen? And what do I know about where I am with that goal? And
Mhm.
then let go of it. Go play pickleball, where your mind is, out there, but something more internal is happening inside. It's not intellectual.
Yeah, I know. If I'm having a shower and I get relaxed, where I seem to be like focused on just having a shower, it's a similar thing where just everything gets quiet and then just the answer just arrives.
What does a shower do energetically? Think
It-
about it in terms of your aura.
yeah, and that's how I think of it. I go into the shower kind of imagining that everything's being washed away.
And
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Everything for your mental waking world aura.
Yeah,
See, the advantage working with the multidimensional, and Ra recognized that. In fact, one of the last communications I had from him, I had sent him. He was angry at me for doing the additional calculations, and I sent him Lokai's chart, and he wrote back and he said to me, "You're onto something. There's something I see in this that I couldn't see any other way." So when you deal with the energetic worlds, you're dealing with another part of yourself that is much more important to master than who you are in the waking world.
mhm.
And that's partly what I think is your struggle right now. Um, I know something about your own personal struggle. And the frustration you feel is that you're living more in the mental waking world than you are in your own spiritual path. And if you keep engaging with the outside world, it interferes with you knowing and being guided by your higher self to achieve your goals in the spiritual world.
Okay. Okay. I got to sit with that one. Um,
And does it make sense to you?
it did. It's more of what you said. You said something like, if you keep engaging with the mental world, like, am I? I mean, I think that you're also saying take a step back and take a break, but I just feel like I'm doing that a lot lately. So it's kind of a sink or swim decision fatigue.
Well, when you take a break, the question is, what do you do on your break?
Hmm. Well, you
And
I go digging for more info. So it's not a break. Yeah.
I'm suggesting you take a break and really go inside, Sean, and ask yourself, what do you want the next 10 years of your life to be like? And where do you want to be? You know, you don't need you can question where you live, you can question what you do, you can question who you're with. There are a lot of areas that may need a reset.
Mhm.
And without doing that, you could end up taking a path that is distorted because you think it's the thing you should do. And I don't think you want shoulds anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. I don't like shits.
Where's your
Um,
where's your Chiron?
21-1.
Oh, and then is it always there?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And 21 is tied to breath. And the number of times we've talked, and I get worked up, and you're reminding me to breathe. Like I have to actually think about breathing, like constantly focus on it. And it's I don't know if it's a fear, like my body's like I don't trust my body to remember to breathe. It's it's strange that something that should be so trivial is such a
Oh,
challenge.
when you look, no, Sean, when you look at your design, your solar plexus always remains undefined, as does your heart center. And you didn't send me the integrated, did you? Let me look at it.
Oh, I can share it here if you want, or if you've got it. Like every center is defined in my total integrated vehicle.
Yeah, but it's a question of where. Let me look at it. Hold on.
I'll
Get
take a
that.
look at the chat
Oh,
here.
you get the solar plexus through the 1949. So you get it through a spiritual channel.
Mhm.
So it's a portal between the biologic waking world and the spiritual world. And it is a rather important portal because in you, that portal will only occur in and be active when you are in the more spiritual dimension, meditating, etc. Did you do TM?
I'm still doing my hybrid. I haven't. I don't have the budget right now to go have it done properly, but I definitely trying to get close on my own. So
The
what I have done is sort of taken. I spent a good amount of time last week trying to understand how transcendental meditation worked. So it was like come up with a mantra, come up with a tone, focus on that tone. So I've been kind of like trying to reverse engineer it without paying to go for it. But
they have a sliding scale,
yeah,
and you probably could get it pretty affordably. They were on a push recently to make it very global. And, David Lynch had a foundation giving it away and very active in Los Angeles. He died recently,
yeah.
but his foundation does do low cost. But the organization, they they have a sliding scale and you can just check the lowest box.
Okay.
One of the teachers told me to tell clients they can just check the lowest box. They don't ever check and they don't care.
So like one that's a David Lynch, like that's look for.
No, no, no. Transcendental meditation,
Okay.
the real deal, not a substitute.
Can it be like Reiki though, in that the person teaching it could be a diluted version? Like, is there a?
Yes. Well, that could be, but if you go through the transcendental meditation portal,
Hmm,
you can get a bona fide teacher.
okay.
And I don't know why it's different than any other meditation. I've been a meditator for over 50 years, and I don't know. I've done other meditations. Um, Clients have done other meditations. My clients who did transcendental meditation still meditate.
Hmm.
And the ones who did other meditations fell away. So I don't know what the difference is, but I know that, and when I did transcendental meditation, it was 1974, and I had recently divorced my husband, June of 1973. And in December, I saw this little ad in the newspaper, free lecture on transcendental meditation. Okay, free lecture. I may as well go. Maybe I'll meet some people. And I went, and it was the typical pre-class lecture showing that here's the surface, and we function above the surface, and then below the surface is consciousness, and that there are ripples in the consciousness. And when you still your mind and you meditate using transcendental meditation, the ripples above surface even out, and you go to the depth of the soul, basically.
Mm.
I thought, well, for $75, I could afford to do it.
Hmm.
Well, it was an old, what?
I thought it was like $1,500 or something now. So, uh,
Well, it's the high end, but the lowest end, the last I looked was 300
oh, okay. Well,
or 340. In any case, it was $75 when I took it 50 years ago. Um, and it was in Old Town, which was in a really nice part of the near north side of Chicago. And um, I lived uh, in near north of Chicago, so it was close. Anyhow, I went to this brownstone, and I'm sitting there and I'm smelling incense, which I'd never smelled before. And there are lots of people coming and going. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And I'm thinking to myself, they're taking people down in the basement. What are they doing to them down there?
mhm.
And I was afraid. I mean, who knew what was going to go on? And finally, it was my turn, and I had my flowers and my fruit as an offering. And I went downstairs with the teacher and put the offering down. And then he said, sit down. And I sat down. And he said, close your eyes. And I closed my eyes. And he went through. And he whispered a mantra. He said, start saying this to yourself.
Mm.
And I was gone within moments. It was like magic to transcend to a completely different dimension. And 20 minutes later, 22 minutes to be exact, you're done.
Mm.
And you leave, and then there's 4 lectures after that to check you, make sure you're meditating right, to give you some theory and tell you what's happening. But within a week, I went from being stuck at swimming 8 laps to swimming 13.
Mm.
And I went, whoa, this TM really works. My language was a little bit different. This shit really works.
So I'm so fascinated by the whole concept. So when you went for that, do they tap into you and find a tone and a mantra, or they just,
No, it's secret. I've never said it out loud.
right?
Years later, I did take the advanced class and got a second addition to my mantra. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. Um, but there's something in the process of initiation that activates it, just like with Reiki. Everybody has healing in their hands and they can put it on somebody. But I know when I do my symbols for Reiki, it's a different energy.
Hmm.
So it's the same with Qigong. I still, when I meditate, find myself doing my mantra. And it takes me to a very different place than any other meditation.
Hmm. I have noticed for sure, probably because of all the digging I've been doing on it. It's all these celebrities coming on my YouTube feed talking about how they swear by transcendental, and it's some of these folks. It's been like Jerry Seinfeld, I think, was the '70s as well, and so all these very successful yet seeming to be living the life they want, right? Jerry Seinfeld does not seem like a guy that's worried every day. He's just doing his thing and enjoying his life. So it's a good
You
reminder.
know, I don't know. uh, Um, I would say pretty much my whole adult life, I've been a meditator. And I made choices that were aligned with my soul um, from before I started meditating. But once I started meditating, there was no going back. And I think well, it opened all of the psychic abilities. And then I did some pretty gutsy things for a single woman. Um, and then gutsy things once I met Marvin and married him.
Mhm.
Um, I did things in my practice that included consciousness. I recommended to all of my patients that they do TM.
Mhm.
All of my clients were initiated into Reiki. They were all Reiki not Reiki masters, but Reiki second degree students.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, I don't need to be convinced of the power and value of meditation at this point. I'm still surprised at how I forget to utilize it. Like I'll catch myself, but oh, it's been 3 days, and I'm all worked up again, and then like, what are you doing? Like, because there'll be other times where I'll do it in the morning and at night and in the afternoon. Like it really is.
Well, you should have a set time when you do it,
I know.
and a set time when you do other things.
Yeah, yeah. I'm starting to get into some better routines and habits, slowly clicking in. So
Not ever too late, Sean.
no, no. Cool. We got a couple people in chat here. Just
Okay.
any questions? Lots of people tuning in though.
How many?
Well, it's always hard to read. But this looks like about seven, but sometimes it's quite a bit different than what it displays. But considering we didn't get it out announced, it's people are just tuning in. It's cool. Um, yeah, JSauce, who I haven't talked to in a while, I should catch up with her. Have you heard about the telepathy tapes? There's quite a fuss about these things called the telepathy tapes, and
Mm-mm.
I think I'll probably muck this up, but I think it's basically recordings of sessions of autistic children and their psychic abilities, like basically the tests or experiments they're conducting, and it's pretty.
Yeah, I've heard that there are studies on autistic children and they're telepathic.
Hmm. Yeah, like highly sensitive is, I guess, what would make
Right.
it telepathic. Yeah. Um, so yeah, apparently there's an episode on animal telepathy, is what Jay was saying
I
there.
studied with Beatrice Leidecker, who was the um, initiator of animal communication as a discipline. And when we had, I'm trying to think when it was, I think it was, I think it was before we had all of our kittens. I think Noble was still around. And we had Beatrice come and do a class. I was doing groups every 6 weeks for about 30 to 50 people. And they would go from evening at 6 to Sunday evening at 6. And they would be in our home and people would come and I would give them about a 10-hour break between sessions. Um, and so we had Beatrice come and do a class for one of the groups because everybody in the group had a pet. And most people who met Noble got cats.
Hmm.
So um, she was the first one. Um, I spoke to her main student a couple of years ago who's still doing it, Hibley or something like that. Um, and she talked about when you want to communicate with your animals, communicate in pictures because they're visual and they will read the image that you're thinking, not the words.
Mm. That's interesting. I do know, like, apparently dogs, I don't think they can see two-dimensional. Is that what it is? They like, and dogs can't actually see what would be on a TV screen. Like they can sense and hear an animal.
No, I think they see it
Do they?
because my cat will go and if there's a cat on the screen, he'll paw the cat specifically. And my screen is big.
Maybe that was just dogs then. I'm sure I read that somewhere, but um, it's just interesting that it's, here we are talking about visuals, and from what I understand, they see things entirely different. The other thing, because this comes to my head often, I'm like, I guess I understand that, like, when you leave the room, dogs think that you've just vanished. Like they can't sense that you're in a different place. They just think that you're gone. And so when you return, that's half the reason they're so excited to see you. Is like, oh goodness, they've returned.
I don't think, Sean, that that's really true.
No?
Um, my housekeeper tells me that when I move through the house, Sam always will sniff where I've gone to find me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can leave my office and go out and come back in, and he knows I'm coming back, and he knows exactly where I am.
Mm-hmm.
If I leave the room and go into a bathroom area, or if I run downstairs to go get something, he'll just sit on his pillow. But if I'm getting ready to leave the house, he'll get up and walk out of the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think when I leave the room, I think Sam stay, but I don't say it.
Mm-hmm. And Sam generally stays.
Yeah, Sam is um, extremely well behaved and trustworthy,
Mm-hmm.
whereas Mac is very smart and very well trained and a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's paper that he can eat, he will. I mean, I had a Whole Foods delivery come yesterday, and there was 6 bags, and nobody else was in the house. So I opened the front door and I put them inside the front door to take them into the kitchen. He was ready to chew those bags. He was sniffing which one should he chew.
So it's not the food in the bags. It was actually the paper
The
bag.
paper, the paper.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it. He took my journal out of my backpack. Like he unzipped the zipper, took it out, and took a page out of it. So so I've witnessed that firsthand. Um, hmm. Could we move on to the patterns of orientation thing? Because I found, like, I know I'm always digging and stuff, and I get it,
So
but
you want me to share my screen?
yeah, if you wouldn't mind, because I thought it was very interesting in class, and partly it was a good exercise, just kind of stepping
Okay.
through the order of how you.
These are your 8 charts, not the integrated.
That's right. So my total integrated is all centers are defined, but this is, the way that you were talking about in class of kind of like this is how we step through. I took it as it's kind of my decision making process, right? Is that how you describe it, or how I relate
It
to?
may or may not be your decision-making process.
Okay.
It would be your decision-making process, except that in your mental and spiritual worlds, you're a manifesting generator. And you have the 34, 10, 57. So you have a hard time not manifesting.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and Yeah, the 19 is not everywhere because it goes to the 2. So what's the 19 here? The 19 is your sun. Oh, well, there you go. What does that tell you, Sean?
Uh,
Jupiter is the sun.
so 19's my son in the spiritual world.
Mhm.
What does that tell me?
It's the 19 and the 13.
What?
7, 13, 1933.
Okay. What I know, I don't know a lot about the 19. What I do know is I think it's tied to resources or like making sure that there's enough food, enough safety, and I presume if that's coming from an open route, I'm going to feel pressure to have resources. Is that and that's spiritual pressure?
Yes, let me look. I'm looking in the book and I'm looking to see what we said, what Ross said about that as a portal. 862. Oh, Lightfield. 62, 227. Hold on. It's not delineated in the table of contents. '19. Environments. Oh, this isn't. It brings us to a portal bridge in the 19th gate, the gate of environments. The gate represents the need for an environment that can take in food. That's number one. I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
Um, Gate 19 operates as a portal bridge when people eat. Think about that. In the future, therapy will develop through which to access dream wave information from the demon realm. The work, well, that's not necessary. So what did I say about that? I guess I didn't say anything about it. Okay, so what I'll tell you about the 19th gate is that it is a portal to the emotional world. And it is a portal that um, can transform emotional reactions and bring you some grounding. And in your postnatal solar design, you get the 63. So the connection you have between the 1949 in composite and then it in the postnatal solar activates to the sacral center through the root, um, drives you to make sure that you feel safe. The 1949 is about feeling safe, feeling like you have, I want to say, a nest that is stable and can feed you. And I don't think it's just food. It's not what you eat. It's the energetic spiritual matrix. Therefore, the 19 is not, it's concerned with survival, but the survival has to have a certain quality to it. So if we were to say 1949 is related to food, that food would have to be spiritually aligned with you, or you wouldn't eat it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you're not discerning that way, then you're throwing your body off.
Mhm. That's very interesting and timely. It's
Um,
interesting that I want a nest.
Also, note that I'm reading the 1949 connection in the postnatal lunar design.
Mhm.
So you do not interpret that the way you would interpret it if it were the 1949 only in the mental world.
Mhm.
You have to add the collective unconscious to it, and you have to ask yourself how it's actually functioning and moving in a flow of energy through the body map.
Yeah, I need to be spiritually comfortable, spiritually safe. That kind of sits.
You have all three portals to the spiritual world.
What are the other two? So 19 is one, right? What are the other?
Yes. The 62 and the 62, you have the 19, you have the 57,
Mhm.
you have the 42, and then the Chiron moves into the 21. Mostly it stays there.
Interesting. Well, now I want to ask you because it's prior to meeting you, I had what I thought was an epiphany about a year and a half ago. Because at that point, I was working with the dream grave design, and when I was digging, the clue was that I had 42, which in Ra's world he called that the weak point or the Achilles heel or whatever, and that was the 42 was that.
Why would he call it that?
Uh,
I heard him say that.
yeah, well, there's a whole world where people discuss that now, and it was an eye opener, but it definitely what I remember at the time was that I had this 42 in that dream rave, and my wife and my mom have the 53, and there was a pattern there, and I was like, oh, this at the time it just explained so much. It was almost like they were starting things, but I always felt pressure to finish it somehow. And I don't know if I misinterpreted that, but it was definitely stood out at the time as
Rob
like
in the dream design talked about the 5342 as being independence and a need for freedom.
mm,
And the 63, he talked about a format that's a pulse. Um, and that's where he talked about beginning, middle, and end, and starting things that you don't finish.
mm. And would you say that there's any truth to that, or that was just what Ross said?
It's just what Ross said.
Okay, yeah.
Most of the meaning he gave to the channels or the gates um, when he attempted to put it into circuits or make it more than just a channel, did not hold scientifically. I checked all the channels and circuits and um, checked the centers with the meaning that he gave them. And none of what he said beyond the type and the structure of the body graph could be the content of what he said was not validated.
Mm-hmm.
And much of it, most of the medical stuff was completely invalidated,
Mm-hmm.
um, and very disempowering and scary for people.
Yeah.
Like to say to somebody, if you have an undefined throat center, you're going to have throat issues and you could get thyroid cancer and all this stuff. That's not true.
It's also dangerous. It's effectively hypnosis, right? You're projecting onto someone the idea, and they could take it on
Right.
energy.
He said, if you have an undefined heart center, you're more likely to have a heart attack.
Mm.
And if you have a defined heart center, there's some protection. Not true. I tested it on
Yeah.
5,000 people. That means 2,500 in a group of people who didn't die who had that condition, and 2,500 people who did die. And there was absolutely no validity. Same thing about AIDS, same thing about fertility, same thing about fibromyalgia, same thing about addiction. So, 5 samples, none of the content medically that Ra proposed held.
Hmm.
And it was dangerous to tell somebody with gate 6 that they might be prone to prostate cancer is irresponsible.
Hmm. Do you it seems to me that Ra was hoping through you and Marvin to validate this scientifically. From what I
Mhm.
understand, he was always trying to impress his father too, who I think was a doctor or something, right?
No,
So,
his father was not a doctor, but always aspired for Ra to be a doctor.
all right, yeah. So this was almost like a way he could fast track that if he could
Right.
convince you
Yes.
guys, and he
He
knew,
literally said that.
yeah.
Ra was a scoundrel and a liar and a cheat in a lot of instances.
Hmm.
He was also charming, a great storyteller. He could be considerate and kind, and he was entertaining.
Hmm.
Um, when he realized that a lot of what he said would not hold up scientifically, is when he got reactive and wanted to close me out in what I said or did. And I don't like the censorship of free speech
Hmm.
and a free exchange of the work I did, the science. And I did not publish things that would be misconstrued. So, one of the reasons I held back on making some of the data more public was that there were people who wanted to misrepresent what the data said. And from I couldn't do that as a professional. It would have jeopardized my malpractice insurance as well as my psych license. So I didn't do it.
No, it makes sense, and thank you for sticking with it. I mean, here we are, 25 years later, and social media, and a great storyteller has been amplified, and now it's kind of like I just find I'm just like trying to.
Okay, so what did you want to do with the patterns of orientation?
Well, let me open with much as so in traditional human design they call it the incarnation cross, and I know that we're talking about something different, but I just want to comment that until I found you, dialing into the four gates of the incarnation cross was a very interesting exercise. Like I found myself kind of refining, or like things were starting to happen for me. The synchronicities were starting to appear. So that made me really curious about this because this is more fine tuning, as you know I seek. So the other day we were talking about this, and it was sort of this order, and I found an image that I think you would share that's very similar, right? Like it was numbered, and that helped with, okay, this is sort of the path of decision making or the path of how things work out. And you said to concentrate on the words like self knowledge, illusion, right? And
Yeah.
I'm struggling. Like I thought I had a grip on what the Sphinx was. I'm fascinated by like. I think this is what got me excited too. Is when I discovered that as part of my patterns of orientation, there's this Maya thing, and I didn't even understand what it was. And it turns out that it's energy, and like no wonder I'm drawn to qigong and you, and hypnosis and Reiki. Like I didn't know I was looking for that, but clearly even in my design, I was just like going to end up in that space. So if could you help me understand the four different patterns so that I can contemplate this later, and how I can relate it into the different worlds? Because I'm starting to definitely get a grip on the difference between an emotional situation or response and mental. But it's these patterns that if I could just, yeah. Anyways.
Write the words down in sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Sphinx, self-knowledge. Maya, illusion. Sphinx, self-knowledge. Maya, illusion. So on that side, all of the solar is the going for self-knowledge, and all of the spirit is energy and illusion, correct?
Yeah. So.
Then you go to the postnatal.
Mm-hmm.
So the prenatal is, when you were born, those were active. Then after birth, Maya, illusion, then listening. Now, listening came in 2 days after you were born, and it's related to attachment with the mother. So, how well did your mother listen to you? And how well did you listen to her? And it's the transitional pattern of listening. So, it's asking you, right? Because why is it different than the 13-7, 1-2? And this is 13-7, 13-7. So we took the prenatal part of the design in order to delineate the lunar minute and the solar minute. It was a decision that Charles and I needed to make in order to differentiate something for the program.
Okay.
So in your case, it goes from the pattern of the Sphinx to the transitional pattern of listening. Now, if you think about you being born, then you're taken to your mom, and there's a different energy. And you're trying to figure out as an infant what that energy is. So it's still the same 13 and 7, but it's a different sublayer. It's a nuance. So then you go to the pattern, the changing pattern of cycles. What does that mean? And what does that mean for you? What is that? So I would take these words, I'd make a list of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I would ask clean questions. What do I know about changing patterns of cycles for myself? When and how do they change? And when they change, what difference does it make to me? Now, the foundation pattern of Maya illusion and the changing pattern of cycles are very important because they're the lunar design. And in your lunar design, the postnatal has the 54-32 activated completely by the moon.
Okay.
So before you make a decision, Sean, before you know what you need to know, you have to wait a week. And when you write a goal down, you need to ask yourself about it every day for 7 days. Because you don't know what you know.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if the goal really resonates with you and is doable from a physical level. See, you have the 32 everywhere. The 32 is in the biological matrix, and it's your moon. But come on, come back.
It's
Sorry.
no, no, don't. It's funny because you used the term a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, and then even today, you said basically said I have a problem not manifesting. And before you'd used the term like premature manifestation, which just A made me giggle, but B it totally like and I have to slow myself down to other
Yes.
speed, and it's agonizing because it's
It, if you understand how to use it, instead of being agonizing, it will be empowering
Mhm.
because you're making decisions now that are not aligned with the spirit to the body. You sometimes push yourself and you sometimes flake.
Yeah, yeah. Flaking a
And
lot more lately too.
what?
I've been flaking a lot more in the last year. Like I used to be the person that got back to everybody before, like I had this mentality, get back to people before so they don't have any questions. And I realized that I was just wasting my time because they weren't ready anyways. But now I've gone the other end, like an email comes and I'm almost flippant about it. And I don't even like that because I feel like I'm being just
Well, you need to put
party.
certain emails in a separate folder to
Mhm.
come back to in 6 days or
Yeah.
7 days.
There's so
It's right in your chart in the lunar. I would, if I had to pick one chart to use, I
Mhm.
would pick the lunar, not the solar.
Prenatal or postnatal.
Both, the
Oh,
composite,
right.
because that's who we are and that's where we live. And that's Luke. Luke, he wants to knock things over. He always comes out at this hour and tries to knock things over. I guess he wants attention. Um, so in many charts, I see this. And in somebody who's a manifester, what you really, a manifesting generator, as you are, what we have to look for is what the timing is for that manifesting generator. Because a manifesting generator has the impulse to take action, but needs to tune into the spirit to know if it's really right action or wrong action.
Mhm.
And that comes in balancing the splenic center and the solar plexus. Now, you do get the solar plexus also in your, oops, I just lost my screen.
Mhm.
Somebody stepped on my keyboard. Um, you get the 1949 in the postnatal lunar.
Mhm.
And so the emotional stuff, whatever it is that you're influenced by from another person, now has a track to get back up and then end up with creative intelligence.
Hmm. Oh, cool. Thank you for that. And I think there's a number of people that will benefit from kind of seeing this laid out this way in this discussion because it I would say the one common thing I hear is just it's overwhelming how many charts there are. So even just like like where do I start? So
You
yeah.
start with looking at what turns on and off.
Hmm.
This is a picture of how you function. It's not telling you how you function.
Hmm.
It's giving you your own map of what's turning on and off and in what world.
Mhm.
And be aware that 1, 2, 3, 4 charts are actually the composite of who you were when you were born. So you can't take a human design chart and think that it's all of you.
Mhm.
It's not. It's a 1/8 or less of who you really are. And to live taking that as real is so disempowering and irresponsible.
Mhm.
Um, it's actually unethical. As a psychologist and a clinician whose job was to save the soul of my clients, um, giving them that kind of misinformation, I would consider malpractice. And I know that's harsh.
Yeah.
I did science on 45,000 cases, and the human design chart would have misled a huge proportion of them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's all very interesting. Like prior to having met you, design had enough grip on me that it was like this. It resonated so deeply, but it's resonating deeper as I also release uh, overthinking of it as well. But it is quite like I have to reverse engineer, like step back, right?
I
So,
had to do the same thing, Sean. When I first got the design, I thought it was amazing.
mhm.
And but I kept saying to Ra, but Ra, I'm not a manifester. And when I showed Catherine de Jersey the system, when I just had human design, she said to me, I thought astrology was deep. Do you think it's too late for me to learn this?
Mm.
And she was probably 85. Not that that's old.
No. Did she end up learning it a bit, or she was just curious?
No, no, no. She had Parkinson's for many years,
Oh,
and toward the end of her life, she fell and broke her hip, and then the Parkinson got worse, and she was declining, and she would, it was before there was Zoom,
yeah.
so she couldn't really continue seeing her clients, although I think she did readings on the phone.
Mm.
And she did periodically call me and ask if I could see when she was going to die because she thought she should have died a number of years before. And
Mm.
she was anxious to go. And at one point, she called me and said, I planned a party. For God's sake, why didn't I die?
Wow.
Everybody could have celebrated.
So, if she was so tuned into astrology, why would she ask another for it? Was she looking for like a second opinion? Did she like
She thought she was going to die and she didn't.
Mm.
And I have not ever met anyone who can predict death from a chart.
Mhm.
And when my mother was alive, um, I really wanted to know when she was going to die. And I I studied sidereal and Vedic and interdimensional, and nobody could tell me. And then I thought that Thurza Escobar could do it because she did not just the dwads, but the super dwads, which take each astrology sign to out of every 30 degrees, which would be 12 signs in those 30 degrees, you get 144. So I studied Thurs's stuff, and then she was already dead, and her husband, Joe Allen Jones, who was a mathematician, invited me to come in and have access to her private library
Mm.
and her private papers. And so I went through all of her papers and her books and attempted to see if I could find the death stuff. And it just wasn't there.
Hmm. I mean, that could open up a whole set of questions, like, but
Are there any questions on the streaming?
when the screen sharing goes, I can't see my other screen. Give me a sec. Uh,
Let me stop sharing.
yeah, go ahead. Uh, oh, there's a bunch in here. Hang on a second. Oh, JSOF's going to be sending me the link to the episode. Jay says her dog doesn't register screens. I think that was when we were talking about TV.
My cats register my screen.
Yeah, when I think about with my dogs, they seem to register to this. I can tell they hear it, but I don't. They don't really seem to see it. But that could just be that. Oh, there's a new name. Katie Jaramillo. Happy Valentine's Day. Perfect time to thank you for inviting us all to learn and grow through sharing these fascinating and informative conversations. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I'm just looking for questions. Oh, apparently I have the wrong year on the title. Thank you, Raven. And Mundane Mystic. I'm so fascinated hearing these stories about Ra. By all accounts, he seems like a bad person, but still he was able to receive so much valuable info without prior esoteric knowledge. One thing, I've actually had a few people ping me privately lately, like that want to connect, and they've been doing their own research on Ra, and they seem keen to tell me about it. One of them was that he was kind of working on this system 10 years before he had received the voice. Like he was already in this space and doing that. That wasn't the impression I had gotten until some
No,
research.
he didn't say that. He was prior to getting the information, according to what he told Marvin and me, he was basically a lost soul, using lots of drugs, being basically homeless, living in a shack. He says living in a tree, but it wasn't a tree, it was a little building.
Yeah.
And he was on ketamine constantly and other psychedelics. And when I knew him, he was constantly using marijuana. He was a chimney, smoking and using marijuana all the time. And I don't know what other drugs.
Hmm.
Um, and his diet was abominable. And his wife was horrified with his diet and would call her the food police.
Mm.
But he never he was teaching kids, and he said he wanted to teach kids and that he thought human design would be a good teaching for them to be more themselves. In fact, it would move them away from themselves the way he was teaching it. But no, he never mentioned working on it. In fact, when I asked him about the way the energy comes in when you're horizontal, because it comes into the hexagrams differently, he said he would send me the original body graph, which he never did. And he said the voice spent 5 days out of 7 working with him on the exact measurements of the body graph, and that getting it precise was the most important thing.
Hmm.
And the body graph that I use is the original body graph. And I own the rights to it because Ron never copyrighted it. So when we were legal partners, the contract we had was that anything we published, I kept the rights to.
Mm.
And one of the first thing I published was the body graph. So I would own the copyright. That and the mandala synthesis is now trademarked.
I have so many thoughts around that whole thing there. One is it'll be interesting once I connect with this other person, what I find out about like maybe Ra actually was working on something before The Voice and didn't share that because it wouldn't be as mystical. Like
Yeah, I would not, Ra was a druggie. Druggies have mystical experiences all the time. They
well,
get all
lose
kinds of
track of
great
time.
information.
You lose track of time too. So even the whole like, was it 7 days? From my understand, what the dog was basically dehydrated and dead for 7 days, like lying at his feet, the way I've heard the one story, or something to that effect. So maybe it
Well,
was
Ra's
what he's,
stories changed with who he was telling it to.
yeah, yeah, that seems pretty evident. So, okay, well, we
I
clocked it.
did, I did write the bio, I think it was the mammalian design book, and it was a transcript, and I have it to publish. And Ra got very angry at me for publishing it.
Mhm.
I'm not sure why, except that he didn't give me permission.
There's some there's some interesting parallels. We can probably discuss this afterwards, but like that fellow that I told you about in my life 7 years ago that ruined me, he was trying to impress his dad, and there's so many things that are very similar in just how people will behave when they've got a trauma or whatever it was, whatever block that nothing else matters. It's just single focus and dangerous. So, um,
Any
going
other,
around there.
yeah,
No, that was it for comments. I know you got to go in a little bit, and I was hoping to just chat with you for a couple minutes afterwards here. So,
okay.
okay, I'm gonna tap this off.